It is 1:30 on a Monday afternoon. The news we all expected is now official. The Cleveland Browns announcing that Deshaun Watson will undergo season-ending Achilles surgery, for the injury he suffered against the Cincinnati Bengals in the second quarter yesterday, meaning his 2024 campaign is over, and most likely his Browns career and potentially his NFL career are over as well. We saw DTR get some snaps in an extended role yesterday when Deshaun went out, but then he injured his finger trying to make a tackle on an interception in the fourth quarter. That let Jameis Winston enter the game in the fourth quarter. He led the Browns on a touchdown drive. David Njoku capped it off with a short leaping touchdown grab. So now what do the Browns do? And is this the end of the Deshaun Watson experiment in Cleveland? Will he come back? Will he play for the Browns? Would he want to come back and play for the Browns after the way some fans reacted to the news of his injury? And that's what we're going to discuss today on this Bleacher Report Monday wrap-up stream. Guys, it is, and I mean this sincerely, hard to believe and hard to imagine that just 7 weeks into the 2024 season, the Browns have hit rock bottom. There is no bleaker outlook that any franchise currently has. There is no team in a worse predicament. There is no team in an equally as unfavorable and dark cap situation as the Browns are in. They can find ways out of the cap, but they're going to be paying a lot of players who may not be in uniform and or with the team for years to come. And there's just not a lot of young talent on this team that you can hopefully build around moving forward. But let's start with Deshaun Watson and what it means. And I want to pull up something here specifically as to how we're going to address today's stream. First and foremost, is this the end of the Deshaun Watson experiment in Cleveland? Yes. I can say with 99.2% confidence, this is the end of the Deshaun Watson experiment. I would be shocked if he ever plays another down in a Cleveland Browns uniform. And frankly, I don't think he would want to play another down in a Cleveland Browns uniform. Let's make it abundantly clear. Deshaun Watson and the experiment of bringing Deshaun to Cleveland was the right move when it happened, and it has turned out to be an epic catastrophe. In hindsight, and hindsight's easy to say now, barring some out-of-world comeback from Deshaun Watson, this will go down as the worst trade in NFL history. The single worst trade, considering the assets you gave up to acquire said player, considering the player you allowed to leave in order to bring Deshaun in, considering the production you got from Deshaun on the field, considering all the PR and stuff that came out about Deshaun and how it divided the fan base. This is unequivocally the worst trade in the history of sports. And at the time they made it, it was the right trade. They were trying to upgrade at a position that you need to be better at in order to win a Super Bowl. And Deshaun, take the off-field stuff out of the equation, was certainly an upgrade over Baker Mayfield. Now, he hasn't been with the Browns. These are his numbers throughout his Browns career, and I'm pretty sure I will never have to update this graphic again because I am convinced he won't play for the Browns again. But if you had told the Cleveland Browns that when they traded for Deshaun Watson, when they gave up all that money, assets, moral standing, that he would play 19 games for them and throw 19 touchdowns, throw for fewer than 3,400 yards, all that, you don't make the trade. But that's what the Browns got. In 19 games, 61.2% completion percentage, 3,365 yards, 19 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, and 80.7 quarterback rating, and 3 rushing touchdowns. Not good enough. Simply not good enough. And he obviously gets hurt yesterday. And the reason I don't think that he'll ever be back for the Browns, and the reason I think he doesn't ever want to come back for the Browns, are a little separate. Let's start with the reason I don't think he'll ever be back from a purely football standpoint. Deshaun Watson had his 2023 season end when he suffered a shoulder injury against the Baltimore Ravens. Now, he may have suffered the injury against the Titans, then it got worse for the Ravens, whatever. But Deshaun didn't play after that Ravens game. Now, that was a shoulder injury that the NFL had never really seen before. It's a pitching injury. It was a scapula issue. It wasn't just a traditional shoulder injury. It was a scapula issue. And the only even relatively comparable NFL quarterback injury and situation like that was Sam Darnold. It took him years and years and years to end up recovering from. So it was an unknown what Deshaun was going to be entering the season from a health standpoint. And I can only tell you what I saw from my eyes. And if you disagree, you can disagree. We can go back and forth and have a civil football discussion on this. Deshaun's arm was not what it used to be. This season, Deshaun was 3 of 19 on deep passes, which ESPN tracks as passes beyond 20 yards of the line of scrimmage. 3 of 19. Of those 19, 12 were considered off target. So not drops, not deflected, just off target throws. Deshaun's arm was not the same this year as it had been in the past. And what's the most important thing you have to have as a quarterback? It's a strong arm. Okay, so Deshaun's arm was not 100% healthy from where it was, and it probably, and I'm guessing, but I'm saying probably for a reason, would never get back to the level it needed to be for him to be a super successful NFL quarterback anymore. So what did Deshaun have to do to adjust? Well, he used his legs a lot. He scrambled a ton. He was moving in and out of the pocket. And while I didn't think he was the exact same athlete he was in Houston, he did a pretty good job evading pressure and trying to get out of situations, which his offensive line put him in. His offensive line's been bad this year. I mean, the numbers speak for themselves. The offensive line has been poor. I'm not trying to absolve them of that, but this stream today is focusing on Deshaun Watson because that's what Bleacher Report asked me to focus today's stream on. We could do a whole different offensive line stream on another day, but today we're focusing on Deshaun Watson. The offensive line had been bad. Deshaun Watson had been equally as bad. So Deshaun needed to use his feet to extend plays because he wasn't comfortable in the pocket. Do you know what's really hard to do? Use your feet and scramble when you're coming off an Achilles injury. I know he's 10 years younger than Aaron Rodgers, but look at Aaron Rodgers this season. He has no mobility whatsoever. Aaron Rodgers was never Mike Vick, and he was never Patrick Mahomes or Deshaun Watson in his prime as far as a mobile scrambling quarterback, but he certainly wasn't a statue, and he's become a statue coming off an injury to his Achilles, similar to what Deshaun Watson just suffered on Sunday. And how do you expect a guy with the lackluster arm that's just not as explosive as it once was, lost some athleticism, and now he's coming off an Achilles injury? With all due respect to Deshaun, and I wish him a speedy recovery, you can't have a quarterback like that. Like, you can't play an NFL situation if you can't escape pressure and you can't hit deep passes, and all you're doing is consistently just checking the ball down. His numbers in his final half against Philadelphia and the first half against Cincinnati, his completion percentage was super high because he's just checking the ball down. If you look at his passing charts, I have his pass chart against Philadelphia, and everything's within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage. He had become a check down Charlie, which is fine. You could win in the NFL like that if everything else around you is perfect. The things around Deshaun Watson this year were far from perfect. The receivers stunk. The line stunk. They have no running game. It just was an unsuitable way to win football games with Deshaun's current physical limitations. And now he's going to be a 30-year-old quarterback coming off back-to-back season-ending injuries, one to his upper body, one to his lower body. I just can't imagine, unless his arm just regenerates and somehow his Achilles is more superhuman than other guys we've seen in the past, I just don't see how he ever returns to being an all-pro caliber quarterback. And with the money he's due to make and will still make, that money's guaranteed, he's going to get it, and the off-field distractions that come with him, I just can't see why another team would want to pick up Deshaun Watson. Now, from the other side, why would Deshaun Watson not want to come back and play for the Browns? Well, listen, guys, we're going to have to call a spade here. The behavior of Browns fans yesterday, and not all of them, let me make it abundantly clear, not all of them, but a faction of the fan base who cheered Deshaun Watson when he got hurt or cheered for the injury, that's disgusting, despicable behavior, guys. And it is one thing to not like Deshaun Watson. And I'm not saying Deshaun Watson's a good person. We all have our individual opinions on what happened or what didn't happen. He was never fully convicted, but the allegations, there are many, and he has settled 27 separate cases. I'm not saying he's a good person. I don't know Deshaun personally whatsoever, but I was raised, when someone's hurt and can't get off the floor by themselves, that's not the time to cheer. That's not the time to express your distaste and dislike for a person. And it's the kind of thing that players around the league certainly take notice of. The comments from Myles Garrett, well, I think he went a little too far by calling Deshaun a model citizen, were coming from a place of defending a brother and defending someone he has gone to war with and gone to battle with. And same thing with Jameis Winston. I don't agree with all of his comments when he said Deshaun's done everything he can to better himself and all that. Like, that part of it, I don't agree with. But the overall sentiment of what he's saying is when a person is down like that, that's just not the time to display your displeasure and dislike for him. There are appropriate situations and inappropriate situations to do that. Whether Deshaun did what he's accused of and whether he didn't, I truly don't know. And like I said, I don't personally condone any of that behavior whatsoever. But if he's on the ground and can't get himself back up and there's a cart coming out and this could be the end of his career, that's just not the time or the appropriate place to express that. You want to do it in your own personal backyard or in your living room with your friends and family around? Sure, fine, whatever. But not at a game. Not at a game. And this is not just Cleveland fans. Bull said it on today's UCSS. If this same situation was copy and pasted in Green Bay or Cincinnati or the Los Angeles Chargers, Rams, Raiders, whatever, the same thing would have happened in a bunch of different cities. This is not Cleveland specific. But I just didn't like how that came off as a look. And the players certainly didn't do that. And now it's going to become, over the next 10 weeks of the season, the players versus the fans, and how both sides kind of handle each other is going to be quite interesting. Speaking of interesting, it's worth pointing out that with Deshaun out, we actually may get our most interesting football games of the season, despite the fact the Browns are completely irrelevant in terms of the playoff discussion. The question now is DTR or Jameis Winston, who are you going to start? And the spotlight now is directed squarely. There's no more Deshaun Watson to blame. It's focused squarely on Kevin Stefanski and this front office to see what they can do over the next 10 weeks to prove who's going to stick around next year, who's worth keeping, who's worth trading, who's worth cutting. Is Stefanski the right coach to lead a rebuilding team? Is Andrew Berry the right general manager to build and draft a rebuilding team? We're going to find out in the next 10 games. Listen, the Browns offense with Deshaun Watson, I'll show you his numbers for his career again. His numbers this year, his 5 touchdowns, 3 interceptions this year. His completion percentage is up. His yards are way down. This is his 19 games as a Brown. On the season, Deshaun was on pace to throw for slightly under 3,000 yards. He was on pace to throw for 15 touchdowns and 12 interceptions. Those are JV numbers, guys. Like, it wasn't good enough. So the offense, regardless of whether they go to DTR or Jameis Winston, it can't be worse. It just simply can't be worse. Like, it can't be worse. They are almost dead last in every possible statistic, not just this season, but in the tracking era. So whether it's DTR, whether it's Winston, I say it can't get worse because statistically speaking, it frankly can't. Will it get significantly better? I don't know. I think one of the two gives you a better chance to win. The question is, do you really want to win? And do you want to improve? Or is the rest of this season trying to figure out what you have in some of these younger guys, and can you build the bridge and gap the, what's the word I'm looking for? And shorten the gap between, do we need to tear this entire thing down and start from scratch? Or do we have enough players on this roster that if we just get a couple little tweaks here and there, we can be good enough to be in a playoff contention spot next season? If that's your goal, if you want to just tweak things here and there, but you think the rest of the roster is good enough to compete, then you start Jameis Winston moving forward. We saw on the one drive Jameis played yesterday, he went 5 of 11, led him on a touchdown drive. His numbers should have been even better if it wasn't for a Jerry Jeudy drop, and we could talk about the receivers and their lack of production here in a second. But Jameis Winston did some pretty good things yesterday, and he runs an offense, or is more comfortable running an offense, that fits more of how Kevin Stefanski typically in the past has liked to call game plans. If you notice, even before Deshaun's injury against the Bengals, they ran more under center play action passes in the first quarter and a half of that game than we had seen the entire rest of the season combined. That was an intentional move from Kevin Stefanski to get back to the basics. They had scrapped a lot of the new spread elements that the Browns had implemented to try and make Deshaun more comfortable. That's what Ken Dorsey was brought here for. Ken Dorsey, you can hit the road for all I care, man. You've done a terrible job. And it's not just you. It kind of all goes together. But the Browns have done a terrible job trying to change their offensive philosophy. And it's no surprise that as soon as their backs were up against the wall with no more wiggle room, they went back to what they do best, and that is running the ball under center play action. And that's what Kevin Stefanski does best, or what he's most comfortable calling. So if you want to run that system and you want to do that to see if you can win a few games here and be more competitive for the fans, for Nick Chubb, for Myles Garrett, for Bitonio, because those guys don't deserve to go through an entire rebuild again. They already been through it once. If you don't want to put them through that again, then Jameis Winston's the guy you have to start, because I do think, all things being equal, he gives you the best chance to win. He does. And DTR we saw yesterday, and I'm not judging too much off DTR from yesterday. He didn't find out he was going to be the backup quarterback until Friday. He didn't figure out that he was going to play until Deshaun got hurt. So similar to the Baltimore game last year in week 4 when he had to start in spot duty for Deshaun, he just wasn't prepared, had taken none of the first team reps. So he gets a little bit of a pass, but he didn't look good in his extended action yesterday. Let's just be honest with each other. His 2 best plays were both running plays. He's explosive as a runner. He's dynamic. When I mentioned Deshaun had lost a little bit of that dynamacy from his Houston days, it was pretty clear watching Deshaun scramble versus how DTR scrambled yesterday that there's just a different level to the speed and quickness, the burst that you see from one of them. And then you have to worry, all right, well, if that's where Deshaun was now, how explosive could he be coming off an Achilles injury? But that's a discussion for next season. Deshaun's done for this year. It's either DTR or Winston. Stefanski said they're going to add another quarterback before it's all said and done, but we'll see who that is. They got Joe Flacco off the couch last year. Can they find another guy in that ilk? We'll see. I think they have it in Jameis, but if they want to just evaluate the young guys, then DTR is the move. I tweeted out yesterday that if you ever played backyard football, the old computer game like OG, late 1990s, early 2000s, watching DTR run back there, just run around like a chicken without a head and trying to make things happen was kind of like watching Pablo Sanchez play backyard football. His helmet was huge, just kind of running around, making stuff happen. It was entertaining 2.5 quarters, but it was not a very productive. His stats, and I'll pull it up. I want to make sure I get these 100% correct because I don't want to mislead the audience out here, but he threw for 84 yards, completed 11 of 24 passes. He had the 2 interceptions. The first interception wasn't on him. It hit Cedric Tillman in the hands. It actually looked like Tillman tried to stop on a route, and he was aiming for Akins behind him. That was a little miscommunication. That happens. Whatever the second interception, who the heck knows what happened on that? Elijah Moore wasn't looking. It could have been a decoy. It could have been a clear-out route. I have no clue what that was supposed to be. And DTR gets the blame because you can't just throw it blindly, but, I mean, that was as ugly as it gets. We've seen DTR in previous action. I think the only thing we know about DTR for certain, the only thing I could say I'm 100% confident with DTR is that his body's fragile. His body's fragile. And I just don't trust DTR in a long-term situation to be a guy that you have to count on in the most important position in sports. That's just not, I think, viable for DTR. He gets concussed against Denver in his third career start, technically. The Baltimore game was 2nd in a row. He comes back against Houston, plays 5 plays against Houston, and dislocates his hip. Out. Missed a bunch of training camp. Comes back this year in his first game, injures his finger making a tackle. If you're a quarterback and you throw an interception in garbage time, and it was garbage time, let's be honest, it was garbage time, don't you dare get near the guy returning the ball. Only bad things can happen. And the chances of you getting hurt are significantly higher than any positive that can come out of that situation. So I hated the fact that DTR was attempting to make that tackle and he got hurt. It doesn't seem like it's too serious, but I just stay away. Jameis, Deshaun, DTR, Shador, Cam Ward, Quinn Ewers, Carson Beck, whoever the quarterback is at some point for the Browns, stay away. Stay away. And DTR especially, you weigh 175 pounds with rocks in your pocket. Like, stay the heck away. So I'm not fully ready to write off DTR based off yesterday. Like I said, no prep, no practice reps. How are you supposed to come in and succeed in those kind of situations when the rest of the offense around you is collapsing? The line wasn't good enough. Nick Chubb looked human, which I think we all expected, but he looked extra human, a little bit concerning with him coming off a serious injury. The receivers, shout out to Cedric Tillman who balled out because that was by far his best game as a pro, and he outgained Jerry Jeudy and Elijah Moore together. So it was just a disappointing overall performance from the Browns as they try and figure out what to do. As far as Stefanski goes with this situation, man, all eyes are on you, Kev. All eyes are on you. I think that you may be the fall guy for this entire season being just a giant cluster, you know what. But you have 10 games now to try and save your job and try and prove that you can get the most out of quarterbacks as long as they're willing to do some sort of compromise between what they want to do and what you want to do. The play calling has been suspect this year. The game planning has been suspect this year. And the spotlight now is directly on you. There's no more variables. It's no more, well, Deshaun can't do what I want to do. You brought in Jameis Winston and you brought in DTR. You drafted them. Those are guys that you evaluated and said, they fit my system. I can work with these guys. So now make it work. Or else your head's on the chopping block as we continue to figure out who will be here next season and who won't be here next season. Kevin, the pressure's on. And you're a 2-time coach of the year. We're going to see if that was a fluke or if that's a reality over the next 10 weeks. And the last thing Bleacher Report wanted me to touch on, will this team now be better that Deshaun is out because he had played so poor? I mentioned it earlier. The offense can't be worse. And I mean that wholeheartedly, sincerely. It may be just as bad, but it can't be worse because the offense had been that bad. They did eclipse 300 yards for the first time yesterday, so we got baby steps. Let's give a little golf clap for the baby steps. They eclipsed 300 yards for the first time this season. DTR chipped in with 84. Jameis Winston chipped in with 67. Deshaun threw for 127. He was 15 of 17, but for 128 yards, most of those were just checkdowns. They barely ran the ball. 21 carries, 77 yards, but 44 of those yards came on DTR read options. Nick Chubb had 22 yards on 11 carries, strong 6 on 3, Ford 5 on 2. The running game was a non-factor. You saw Jack Conklin on Nick Chubb's first rush attempt get caught up in the backfield, trip, and he made Nick Chubb stumble. Of course, the Browns tackled Nick Chubb on his first carry. That's the most Browns-like move ever. So will they be better? Well, it can't be worse, and that's kind of where I'm leaning towards. I think this season is over. I think the Browns, for the most part, are going to go on a fire sale. They could win 4 or 5 games, but I'm not sure if they're incentivized to. The best course of action, if we're being honest with ourselves, for the Browns is to not win another game this season. Now, you can't tell your players to do that. You can't just throw in the white flag and wave the towel and say, we're going to lose these games. But if we're being honest, they need the first overall pick so they can make their choice at quarterback and not have to deal with the secondary option. So, yeah, I think they'll be better by default of they can't be worse, but is better great? Nah, I don't expect it. I do think Jameis, if he came in, they have 10 games left, I think they can go 500 with Jameis. I think if DTR plays, they probably go 3-7. But I think they can go 500, if not 6-4 with Jameis Winston, because I think they're close. And I do weekly breakdowns with Sean King, the former NFL quarterback Super Bowl champion. And he points out that there are guys open, and in previous weeks, Deshaun just wasn't able to deliver them the ball for a number of reasons, whether it's the offensive line wasn't blocking and giving him enough time to see the guy, he wasn't looking downfield, was too content taking a check down, or 3 just missing throws. There were guys open and plays to be made, and I think of the 3 guys, or now 2 healthy guys, DTR or Jameis. Jameis gives you the best chance to connect on those plays. So all in all, it's a sad day for Browns Nation. I did not like the behavior from Browns fans yesterday. Neither did the players. We'll see how that escalates and then devolves over the next couple of days as we get ready for another home game against the Baltimore Ravens. Kevin Stefanski spoke just over half an hour ago and said DTR is still getting tested. They'll have to see how his grip strength is before they can determine whether or not he'll be able to potentially play against Baltimore on Sunday. If it's up to me, I have 2 easy routes to choose. If you want to win games, you go with Jameis Winston. If you want to just figure out what you have with the young guys for the rest of the year, you go with DTR. It's pretty simple. Now, Kev, the pressure's on you. Because right now, it's you versus the world and everybody. And I mean everybody is watching. That's going to wrap it up for this Bleacher Report. Breaking news stream, Deshaun Watson tore his Achilles. He'll miss the rest of the season. Expected to make a full recovery and back at some point next year. But I don't think we'll ever see him play another down in a Browns uniform. The Deshaun Watson experiment in Cleveland is officially over. And we'll see what happens next for your Cleveland Browns. I'm Mikey McNuggets. You can find me on Twitter at Mike Lucas TV. Until next time, peace.